it starts with Judaism, the laws of Moses. So you have the famous Ten Commandments. The first three are a new theology, monotheism, iconoclasm. And then you have the usual moral principles. You see, don't steal, don't lie, don't covet your neighbor's wife. So these are very old moral principles. We didn't need God for that. They already existed. Look at the Dharma commandments in the Manusmriti or so, they're very similar. And so this just follows from human experience. You know, if you have a society where everybody steals from one another, where everybody kills one another, you know, there's all kinds of problems. So you have to have this principle and teach that to the children from early on, that, you know, you can't behave like that. So those are put there in order to give more respectability to this new theology, because these principles already existed before there was monotheism, before there was an iconic worship. But so from then on they are taken together. Then in Jewish law you have a number of other laws, you know, like on Sabbath, you know, on the rest day, you're not allowed to light fire, which is why today in Jerusalem you can't operate the elevator, because the elevator is igniting electricity, which is a kind of fire. So what they do there in high-rise buildings, they simply have the lift go up and down all the time. So you don't have to start it. Anyway, so you have a number of these commandments. And when Christianity comes about, initially it's a Jewish sect, and so they keep all these commandments. Then St. Paul abolishes them. And so that becomes defining for Christianity. There's no divine law. Then St. Augustine decrees that the only law is charity. So if you consider whether you should do something, ask yourself, is this motivated by charity? And if it is, then do it. And if you sneakingly feel that no, you know, it's essentially selfish, but I dress it up as altruistic, no, then go with your hunch and stay away from it. So only if it's real charity, then you can do it. So that's the simplicity of Christian law. And so for all practical purposes, Christians follow the law of the land. Like in the Roman Empire, there was a small little nervous sect, the Christians. They had no power, they could not impose their own law, so they followed Roman law. But then comes Islam, and Islam starts as a kind of Christian sect. You see, in Christianity you have the doctrine of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And so in the Catholic Church and then in the breakaway Protestant churches, that is still taught. But you had a few so-called heresies where they didn't believe in the Trinity, where they said, okay, God the Father, but no Jesus. I mean, they venerate Jesus. They don't worship him because he's not God. To them, he's just a very special human being, not God. Okay? Now, that sect develops into Islam, which is a very interesting but very complicated story. It's not for now. And so in Islam, you have a lot of Jewish elements again, including this idea of a law revealed by God. And so some of it is in the Quran, most of it is in the life of the Prophet. So the main thing in Islamic law is the precedent of the Prophet. If you can show in an Islamic court, let's say you're accused of some un-Islamic behavior, if you can show that you are just imitating the Prophet, then you go free. Then they can't condemn you because they can never say, oh, Muhammad was a bad Muslim. See? But so there the idea is that, you see, man is too small, too ephemeral, you know, too limited to make laws. So the only law has to come from God. That's very much the idea in Islam. Christianity is more broad-based. It doesn't have this one revelation. So for many less important things, it just goes with what is done in the world. But there, it goes very far in accepting the world, and so what it accepts is the power structure of the world. There you have the idea that all power comes from God. And so, when from the 18th century onwards, ideas of equality and democracy and so on came up, the church was against those. It said, no, you should not be, you should not have hubris. You should not think that you are capable of doing this. You see, those who have been put above you, the kings and the cardinals and so on, they know better. And so you see, don't claim authority for yourself, be obedient. And so that was the church attitude until the 20th century, essentially. Like, in the interbellum, for example, there was a thing that they called clerical fascism. The church was rather against fascism, which was a very atheist movement, secular nationalist. Yet they had their own form of authority worship. And so a number of dictators were Catholic especially. And so they also imposed their authority. They didn't believe in democracy, but they paid lip service a little bit to God. You see, it's not that the leader has all power, no Netaji or anything. No, you see, we essentially obey to God, but effectively you have to obey the dictator. Some people say, yeah, you see, democracy was always there in Hinduism. They point, for example, to the existence of a number of republics in ancient India. Like, for instance, the Buddha is often called Prince Siddhartha Gautama. He was not a prince, he was the son of the president for life of the Shakya Republic. And so, you see, people were elected not like in our system for 4 or 5 years. They were elected for life, and then when they died, then somebody else would be elected. It would not automatically be his son who succeeded him. But so the Buddha was very well placed. He could have become the successor simply by his own influence, his own personality. The Buddha was a member of the Senate, the council of that republic from his age 20 onwards. But so he was not automatically the successor. He was not a prince in the feudal sense of the term. So you had a number of republics that ultimately, one after another, get sucked up by the expanding empire of Magadha. Magadha in present-day Bihar. But so because of those republics, many people say, yeah, you see, India is the oldest democracy. Also, you have at the village level, the Panchayats. Now again, Panchayat is not at all a democracy in the modern sense, but at least it was some kind of consultative assembly where every caste was represented. High caste, low caste, in between castes, and they had an equal say. Now, of course, the caste sent a representative. The leaders among them decided, yes, this one. And so, again, it's not a matter of elections or so. Then, in their consultations, they didn't decide by majority vote. They aimed for a consensus. So, I mean, all this is a bit different from modern democracy, but at least it was not a monarchy. There was consultation, so that's, that is commendable. Many Hindus say, oh, this democracy that the British pushed on us, that's a bad system. And so people who try to respect the language of democracy, they say, what we need is a presidential democracy, not this parliament with its fragmentation. You see, a full representative parliament, proportional, where you see the percentage of one particular ideology among the people is represented by that same percentage in parliament. That's very rare. I know only two countries that really follow this is Israel and the Netherlands. And so there you have many parties, and a practical result is that when time comes to form a government, you know, it takes a lot of time to get everyone on the same page, to get so many parties together. But on the other hand, it is the most democratic system. You see, every tendency is represented. You know, in Britain, for example, you can't get a Green Party, an ecologist party, whereas in Germany, in Holland and so on, this broke through because the electoral system facilitated it. In England, only the large parties can be represented, and they perpetuate their power. So in India, you hear people say, yeah, this Westminster system, we have to get rid of it. We have to get something like in America, a presidential system. Now, of course, I know people who are against this. For example, in France in the 1950s, you had a proportional system. It led to chaos. You know, one government fell, the next fell, the next one also fell. And then General Charles de Gaulle made an end to it. You see, he brought a new system, so-called Fifth Republic, which was a presidential system. And so the opponent said, well, this is a permanent coup d'etat. This is just one person who draws all power to himself. So, I mean, I can't easily decide between those alternatives, but what I notice is that in India, very many people say we should have this presidential system. Like in his autobiography, L.K. Advani of the BJP makes that point. Now, that you could say is a modern form of what they really want at heart, is a king. And you see, for example, the enormous popularity of the Maharajas. They lost all power after independence, but they are still very much applauded by their people. And so that attitude is there. Also the way that people deal with their leaders. Okay, they may be elected on election day, but from that day onwards, they are like the king. And they are being venerated like that. So that is quite deep in the Indian mentality. And so these republics, you know, these are ancient republics, they're more than 2,000 years ago. People have completely forgotten about them. And so they, you know, with their worshipful, you know, bhakta attitude, you know, they easily take that worshipful attitude towards the political leader.